Jumping right into questions. John says, hey Nick, what's your ideal rest time between exercises when warming up or doing daily fundamentals? 10 seconds, 30 seconds, only enough time to take another breath. I've never measured it, to be honest with you, John. I've never said like 10 seconds or 30 seconds. I wouldn't say that I rest all that much in between exercises, but enough time to take a breath or two. If I'm playing through like a routine, like the routine that I put out that I know you've been doing, it's called Get Set. That kind of is back to back, bang, 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 bang. But sometimes I pause it, sometimes I need another second or two, maybe 10 seconds, 30 seconds. But I think enough time to stay relaxed, I think is the answer that I would want to give. Whatever the amount of time is that allows you to stay relaxed, that's the amount of time that you should take. I want to talk a little bit about some strategies. And I think that sometimes we skip over them because we're just getting busy trying to deal with the trombone sometimes. And we forget that we have to come up with language that we can play, learn language, develop language that we can play on the trombone that fits into the bebop style. So I think sometimes we get obsessed with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, and we forget about two other really great approaches to playing bebop that come from the piano. And I find that they're a little bit easier to play these type of shapes on trombone than some of the Bird really fast kind of stuff. So that's Bud Powell and Barry Harris. So recently I've been really digging into some detailed stuff about Barry Harris. And so if you are interested, he's got lots of videos online, but he's got some great approaches to just starting to get the flow of playing bebop. And so if you are a person that wants to get better at playing jazz improvisation, going into this world of learning bebop isms. So he has all these little kind of isms, right? So that sound like bebop, make things sound like bebop. They're just like little shapes. And so when I think of shapes, there's like shapes like fourth shapes. There's shapes like triads. There's shapes like chromatic shapes or clusters. There's all kinds of shapes. And there's also like bebop shapes. And so he's got some great ones here. So we're in the key of C. All right, we're surrounding the third. We're in C major. Like he has all these like little things, the little decorations around. Like check it out. So you're gonna add onto that, like add a bebop scale to it. Right? Here's the shape again is. So you can really get a lot out of little items like that. Little bebop isms. So I'm not going to play the whole worksheet, but super underappreciated, I think. So if I can give you any little bit of advice, when you're going after deeper understanding of the language, just trying to take the approach of trying to learn the language like you learned the language, of English or Spanish or any language. You learn by like learning words or little phrases and kind of knowing where they go, and then you kind of figure out how they go together. So we have scales, obviously, and we've got arpeggios, but really we need those type of shapes that sound like bebop. It's not scales. It doesn't sound like scales when you hear Barry Harris or Bud or Bird or anybody. That doesn't sound like scales. It sounds like music, The scales only make up part of it, or the arpeggios only make up part of it, but you got to get those little shapes into your playing. So that's what I call bebop-isms or bebop shapes. And so if you haven't done any of those sort of things, enclosures, and on trombone, we struggle, at least I do, with like, if you haven't played that shape before, like if I haven't played a shape, I'm not going to like totally be able to invent a new way to play a shape on the fly. I have to practice it beforehand. I have to shed, I have to like go in and actually make sure that I can play it, so you got to shed it beforehand. These things aren't magic, JJ worked out his solos. I was just looking ahead to, in one of our classes every semester we deal with JJ Johnson's Bonology solo. It's a super clear example of the fact that JJ used to play similar solos a lot of times on tunes. So there's two recordings of this song, Bonology, and the solos are almost exactly the same until you get to the bridge. The head is the same. The first half is the solo. It's the same. You get to the bridge, and he starts it the same. And then it changes. And he's got different things worked out after that. But there's two versions. What's my favorite big band album? The thing with one of my favorite big bands is Duke Ellington's big band, his orchestra. And the thing about that older music that was originally released on like 33s was that like maybe it was only one tune per side or two tunes. And when they were reissued, then they get reissued on all these compilations. So some of it, I'm not sure, like some of the Ellington stuff, I actually don't know what the original albums were. So to be able to say like original albums of Ellington stuff can be kind of problematic. But I love the Ellington suites. Those are a couple of things that I love, like the Middle East suite, the Such Sweet Thunder suite, and the New Orleans suite. Those ones are favorites of Ellington stuff. And then I love the new album by Maria Schneider, Data Lords. That one's really great. I fell in love with her music through that Concert in the Garden album. You know, the Brookmeyer stuff, like that first record, the Village Vanguard one, the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra with Bob Brookmeyer's music. That's a great one. Just that first one that's got Elko, and that's the one with Clark Terry on it, and it's got Ding Dong Ding and all of those tracks. For some reason I forget the name of that record, but it's blue. I love big bands that have a sound, you know, like that's why I like Maria Schneider's band. That's why I like Brookmeyer's music, because it's got such a vibe. And Ellington, you can tell it's Ellington. You can tell it's bassy, you know. It's not like generic sounding. Like I feel like sometimes, you know, not everyone, but like sometimes people write music that sounds like super generic, or like their ensemble plays music that's super generic. It doesn't sound like them. And it sounds like they're trying to recreate a bunch of other things to fit into like a box that like jazz sounds like this, and like this is the box, and they try to write music that fits into that, rather than like, if you're going to go through the time and expense of like having your own big band, you know, you might as well have a viewpoint. I feel like Gil Evans is another one. There's so many great Gil Evans things, you know. So there's that Centennial album that Ryan Truesdale put out of the Gil Evans project. That's got a bunch of amazing pieces on it. Darcy James Argue writes great music too. But on that album, Centennial, this is connected to Brookmeyer too, and Ryan Truesdale, who runs that project, tells this story usually on the gig that like there's an arrangement of this old Burton Lane tune called How About You, and that it was for the Claude Thornhill Orchestra, and that Claude was it's a really hard arrangement, but it's really short. It's like 3 minutes, really concise, really beautiful, that Gil did, and that he used to always save it for I think he would say like maybe the first tune of the second set or something like that, so that the band didn't drink too much on the set break. And it is difficult, but it's beautiful, and it's so interesting. The orchestration is cool. There's French horns. Obviously, it's for Claude Thornhill's band, so there's flutes and piccolo. Anyway, so for big band stuff, like I really love bands that sound like themselves and don't sound like this is big band, you know, because there's plenty of that stuff out there, and that's good too. But I really I want it to sound like this is the band, and when the personnel changes, it sounds different. I don't want it to sound like this is the archetype of big band, let's make it sound like that, you know. Sometimes that's appropriate, and I could see reasons why you might want to do it that way. But for me, talking about like my favorites, like what's going to make something really stand out to me as a favorite, that's it, man. It's got to have a vibe, and it's got to have a sound. Favorite lead trombone players, you know, I think for the same reason, I can kind of go on the same thing, same vibe, that like Vincent Gardner has such a unique and personalized style. The way he plays is really great. You know who was here the other day was Ben Patterson, formerly of the Airmen of Note. He's an amazing lead trombone player. I really like how Lawrence Brown plays lead trombone. I think Quentin Jackson played great lead trombone. Britt Woodman, you know, all those guys from the Ellington band played great lead trombone. Ryan Keberly is a great lead trombone player, and in a completely different way, but also great. Marshall Jilks is a great lead trombone player. Michael Deese plays great lead trombone, but they all play very different, and I think that's cool. I like that. I like when it's like, oh, this person is shaping the sound of the section, and it's not just going to sound like generic big band, you know. It says, thanks for streaming. Sure thing. I want to copy some of your solos, but can't tell what articulation you use, such as DG, especially in fast passages. How can I get familiar with trombone syllables? That's a Good question. Well, that's nice of you to want to transcribe some of my stuff. So I use like a soft double tongue syllable, something like that, you know. Or if it's triple, I would say like digada, digada, or dagada, or dugada, or digada, 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 digada. I occasionally also doodle tongue. I'm not the most expressive doodle tonguer or a clean doodle tonguer, so sometimes I would I've said this before and I'll say it again now. I'm borrowing from the great Marshall Gilks. At a master class I saw him give, he talks about articulating how you would say the rhythm. So if you're learning one of my solos or somebody else's solos that's fast, how would you say it? Would you go I think using the D and the G softens up so it's not because ta and ka, they make it seem kind of bright and square. But digga digga da or dugu dugu do or daga daga da or some combination thereof, dugu dugu digga 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 digga. Sounds more like, jazz, for lack of a better way to put it. But to learn about trombone syllables, it's an interesting thing. There's the syllable that you say when you articulate, and there's also the syllable on the inside of your mouth when you're playing. So O for the low register, A for the mid register, and E for the upper register. So O, A, E. And this is something Turre really used to get on my case about a lot, making sure that you're matching up the sound you want with the syllable. And that oftentimes when you can't make a clean jump or clean jump in like intervals, it has to do because you got the wrong syllable. So if you're trying to go ah and hit, or o and hit a high note, oh, like it's going to be like, it's not going to come out right. So you got to go o, ah, e. And so you get those by changing the tongue on the inside of your mouth. It says, when do you draw the line between personal choice versus not being informed within a teaching context? In a teaching context, I always lean towards being more informed and always demanding the student to be more informed rather than less informed. I just ask, sometimes in the form of a question or in the form of, as an exercise, could you play as if, we're playing in an Art Blakey tribute and you're trying to be Curtis Fuller and it's fast and blah, blah, blah. Like, what are you going to do? What are the characteristics of how you can play that are going to make it fit this thing? Or if it's somebody that wants to play, like adventurously avant-garde in terms of harmonic stuff, be like, all right, so if you imagining as if, you wanted to be, Bud Powell on the trombone, like what would that sound like? So I usually try to posture it as a question and posture it as like an exercise, or like, all right, so if you showed up on this trad gig and had to play Indiana and not Donna Lee, what would you do different? How could we play another solo on this tune that's going to sound like Jack Teagarden and not like Curtis Fuller or not like JJ? For me, I go to the middle and then work outwards. So I just you gotta understand how harmony works. You gotta understand the great voices of our instrument. And that's kind of like the middle of the history to me at this point. If you're thinking 1917 to 2021, it's the 50s and 60s is that middle point. So like that's a go there and then kind of go outwards from there. Dilly, what do you look for in a drummer? That's a good question. It changes depending on the project, I suppose, but some things that are really important to me about a drummer are, one, that they can swing, and that they got a really strong beat, and that they're not going to slow down. I'm okay if they speed up. If they slow down, I'm not interested in playing with them. I like a drummer that's got fire. I like a drummer that's going to speak, that's going to put their thing on it. Like, I don't want them to just play what I think it should be. I want them to make musical suggestions, not by being like, what do you think about this? But just like, play it. Just do it. Within the context of the music, being informed about the context of the music. So I'm looking for personality. I'm looking for all of that. And then for me, the drummer has to be able to read also. I have too many charts, too many arrangements to be able to hire somebody. And I'm done rehearsing. Like, I try not to rehearse anymore. Not that there's anything wrong with rehearsing. Rehearsing is a very useful thing to do with a band. But like, I don't want to have to rehearse. It's a luxury to rehearse, and sometimes, most of the time, there's no time to rehearse. There's a sound check and that's it. So it's got to be someone that you can trust, So that comes into a lot of it, really, is like a relationship with someone that you trust, personally and musically. And then being able to play in different styles, like my records, they're jazz, but they kind of have a range of vibe, you know. So you got to be able to play all those different vibes, you know. I like a lot of different drummers for different reasons, you know, but they all have that in common, that they have a strong beat, they swing, and they can play a bunch of different things. They can read music, and they're trustworthy. I can trust them to show up for the gig, know the music, wear the right clothes if there's a dress code, you know. I actually don't ever give a dress code for my gigs, but, you know. John has a question. This summer's boot camp, Steve Davis. Yeah, so I've been to the last 2 years. I did a virtual trombone boot camp where we had guest artists and stuff. So for context, and Steve Davis was a guest. So Steve Davis mentioned playing while watching a ball game. Do you ever do that, or is all your playing very focused with intention? Any thoughts? Yes, that's a really great question. I think that there is 100% a time and a place for practicing while you're doing something else, because when we're playing gigs, there's always multiple things going on. You're listening to the rhythm section, and your playing has to be on autopilot. So for me, I have to practice that way too. So when I'm playing or practicing shapes, scales, things that I need to get into the muscle memory, I might do it while watching a ball game, for sure, while I'm doing something else. You know, like it's going through the motions, you're getting muscle memory together. There's also a time and a place where you absolutely don't want to be doing that. If you're trying to practice making music, you got to be 100% focused on making music or composing. Like I can't compose like while I'm distracted at all. Like that's the one activity where I literally have to turn off my phone, shut the computer, and no distractions, because if anything bips or boops, like I can't focus when I'm composing. But when I'm practicing, I think there's a time and a place for that. And I do it, and I did it in college a lot. You know, when it's like, okay, on this day, I can do this at this time and this at this time. Do you use slide cream or lubricant? I use both. I use Trombone, and I also use the Yamaha slide stuff. This stuff here. Trombone, slide, lubricant. This little purple bottle. So I use it in combination because they do different things. You know, like the Trombone is really good for older horns. So on the con that I have behind me, I definitely use that one, and spray bottle. And then the Yamaha is like the in-between, you know, like it keeps things going. What recommendations do you have for mouth fatigue apart from resting? You can start implementing a warm down if you don't do a warm down. The biggest advice that I got from a great trombone player who's teaching at Berkeley right now, I used to teach at Juilliard when I was there. His name's James Burton. He mentioned this to me. He got it from somewhere, I don't know where, but always about practicing in opposites. So if you're fatigued from playing a lot of gigs or a lot of rehearsals, strong and loud, when you go to practice, you need to practice the opposite. So you need to practice smooth and soft and delicate. If it's high, then you got to practice low. You know, and if it's the opposite, then you want to do the opposite. So it's both. It's practicing in opposites. It's being aware of what you're doing and what you need to do to counteract those things. So that, and then I like to do whisper tones, and I like to do pitch bends. That really helps me when my chops are fatigued. But yeah, taking a rest is also good. But sometimes you don't have that opportunity. You got to figure out how to play through it as well. You know, fatigue is part of being a professional. You know, what do you do when you get fatigued? How do you keep going? For me, it's relaxing, focusing on the air, focusing on the breath, making sure that I have great support and using those things to my advantage. So yeah. All right. Well, I got a student coming in just a couple of minutes, so I'm going to jump off. But thank you all for hanging out today, and we'll catch you really soon. Have a great rest of your week, even though it's Tuesday.